Alright guys, can we have a little heart to heart here? Things are getting absolutely out of hand at IEM Dallas. The games are getting wilder, the results are getting crazier. We are seeing performances after performances from players you would never expect to pull up in the most important games, but they're doing it. And finally, on the other side of it, we have the landscape set for the playoffs this weekend. We have decided the 6 teams heading into the playoffs and send another fresh batch of victims packing to the airport. By far, the story of the day was G2 and Team Liquid's incredible set to end the stream, but elsewhere, we saw huge upsets from Heroic, Big, and 9Z, and amidst all that chaos, Team Spirit are looking more and more like the most dominant team in the field. So you missed out on the action live, you're in the right place. We're going to go over everything and also set the stage for the playoffs on Friday. So sit down, relax, crack open a freshie, and take a second and leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel below. Many of you who watch the videos are not subscribed, so make sure you do it because it helps out a lot in the YouTube algorithm. While you are down there, consider becoming an H-Channel member for $5 a month. You can support me directly in what we do here, gain access to exclusive emblems, emotes, a shout-out at the end of every video, as well as access to normal uploads the night before anybody else gets them. And lastly, check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/LionHeartZ1337. I stream Sunday through Friday, 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, talking a lot about IEM Dallas, watching some of the games live when they happen. Just come hang out, say hi. I would love to see you there. And with that out of the way, let's get started with the recap. Right out the gate, we start off with an elimination series between Heroic and NAVI, and man, it's a bummer to talk about. NAVI continue to underperform since the major. They didn't look good to start this tournament. They didn't look good in this series. And Heroic felt like they just kind of cruised through to an easy 2-0 victory. It just didn't feel like we got to see the same all-encompassing NAVI that dominated its way through the major. The strats still look good, but it's the individual performances that are coming up lacking most of the time. When you look at the stats for the series, Wonderful, who was cracking in as like a top 5 potential player in the world back during the major, he's bottom fragging this series quite severely, and that's just not going to be enough. When you're the star opper, you're expected to be one of the best players on this team. You have to perform, especially in these big series when you're facing elimination. And it's not just him, he was bad in this series, but he was good elsewhere. But NAVI come in as the 3rd worst rated team in this tournament as they exit, and no one really put up substantially good numbers over the 5 maps that they played. I really do feel like this team is facing a bit of an identity crisis, and I think it has to do a lot with the fact that nobody expected them to win this major. They overperformed there, exceed expectations. All the while you have this looming specter of Simple, who is still with the organization, who appears to be ready to make a comeback, and we're coming up on the end of the season. The player break is coming up soon. That looks like the type of time when NAVI might consider making that kind of change to bring him back in. So the security, the future of this roster seems shaky. And you add on to that the recent underperformances, the lack of the ability to reproduce since the major, that puts a lot of stress on a young team like this, and it really sucks to see. But we're getting a little bit off topic here. Let's focus back on the series and talk about Heroic and open up on the first map. On Nuke, I think we saw a classic Heroic map, where it was a team effort more than just an individual shining above the rest, as Tessus, Nerds, Nikodas, and Kixen all got their turns taking big impact rounds throughout the match. And yeah, Shush, definitely a forgettable map from him, 9 kills and a .81 rating, but I think the strat calling on the T side was more than solid to make up for it. He's the in-game leader, I'm gonna give him a pass on his fragging most of the time. Considering how well NAVI have played Nuke in the past, especially on their T side, I think Heroic weren't really confident in their lead going into the second half, considering it's only a 7-5 scoreline, and losing the pistol definitely gave NAVI room to start mounting a comeback. But once Heroic got to their first full buy run on the 4th round of the second half, they took over, winning 6 straight to close out the map. And when you look a little bit closer, I think what happened here was Heroic had just a little bit tighter team play. Some of these rounds were pretty sloppy towards the end from NAVI, especially in these low man situations. I'm looking at round 19 specifically here, where there's not really good communication. It's a 3v3 post-plan situation, but nobody's watching mini, so Kixen's able to get a free first pick. That allows Heroic to re-up their retake here. They flash into sight, isolate the player on the silo, allows him to get picked off, so now it's a 3v1. And Jail, he puts up a good fight, but Heroic, they have the man advantage. They can just calmly trade it out for the round win. And that's pretty much how the CT half went for Heroic. They got into these situations where they needed to win out, and they had better coordination to just out-frag NAVI when they needed it. So they go up 1-0, and we are moving on to Mirage. And on Mirage, what we saw was an incredibly close first half that ended 6-6, both teams trading great blows for map control, battling around mid and A. Kixen for Heroic is having a great map. He ends it with 23 kills, 114 ADR, and a 1.72 rating. And for NAVI, it all goes wrong on the second half. Their CT defense here was just not good. they only take 3 rounds. Meanwhile, Heroic win 3 straight off the pistol, then they lose 1. They run off 3 straight once again, then they lose 2 to NAVI, and they're already at match point. They take the next round of their next full buy, and the series is over. NAVI are going home, Heroic stay alive for another series, and unfortunately for the major winners, the future is nothing if not uncertain. Speaking of uncertainty, let's talk about Pro versus Big. And yeah, VP losing here in a 3-map set against Big looks pretty bad, because I think they've looked good in this tournament. The best VP has looked in a while, and Big are a team that are just making a coaching change and also not that relevant in the top 20, so I really would expect Pro to be able to take this one handily, and what we saw here was the best and worst of Pro. Their T-sides continue to be wholly inconsistent, but when it's working and Electronic and Jame are working around each other, again, we see those glimpses of Pro, the future, who could be an incredibly dominant team. I still, at the end of the day, have to question James' spot as an in-game leader. I'm going to continue to do it as long as he is an in-game leader, because I just don't think it is a fit for his playstyle, and I think the results speak for that. But let's give Big some credit. They also played great in the series. Despite losing Gabi as their coach, their long-tenured coach, they've looked good throughout this tournament. Really feels like everybody on this team took turns having great moments. JDC, Crimbo, Tabson, and Searson all had great highlights themselves, and Proza seems to be a great support player if nothing else. And their overall consistency is definitely what gave them the edge over VP in this series. Let's start off with Inferno, which was a 13-5 smacking by Big. And smacking around is definitely what played out. There's not much to analyze from this game. Big just dominated from start to finish, running off 8 straight rounds to open up. And even though VP, kind of gamely came back with 4 T rounds to close out the half, Big won the second half pistol round and never looked back. And on the CT side, it was disastrous. VP couldn't hold anything. Big just had their way with the map, took whatever site they wanted, and dominated. Unfortunately for VP, if Norbert is getting the most kills in your map, that's just not a good look. But hey, it's a 3-map series, we got more maps to play, we move on to Ancient, and VP managed to pull off a great clutch win here, a 13-10 victory, a grinder back and forth, which saw neither team really able to defend anything on the CT sides. This was a T-sided affair all the way, which is indicative sometimes of how the Ancient meta can turn out. For VP, this was really a complete team effort game. Everybody was in double-digit kills. It felt like they really executed their T playbook well. They were taking sites effectively. Electronic and Flit are making for a great rifling duo when this team is on, and Jame had good impact on the op. And that's unusual for Jame because I feel like he doesn't play well in Ancient every other time I've watched him, but here he was great. For Big, I think it's a similar story. Their T-side looked really well, but we swapped to the CT half, the second half of play, and they couldn't defend anything. And really, the economy just got behind. There was no room for recovery. There was no time to get the op in hand. And by that point, it was just too much to overcome. VP too good in the clutch as well. And VP takes this map handily, forcing us to a third map decider on Dust 2. And Dust 2 was an absolute disaster for Pro here. They lose 13-5. And outside of Jame posting 16 kills, nobody else showed up on this elimination game. Meanwhile, Big were firing on all cylinders. Their CT side defense was great. They held off VP long enough to keep the half close. We switched to the T side, and Big just win the first 6 rounds and call it a day. The VP could not defend anything. Big was just taking whatever map control they want. They ran them over. No chance for the ops. No time for Jame time. Electronic, Fame, Flit, all missing. And yeah, that's why VP are exiting here, and Big continue for one more series. They're still alive. And at this point, I don't know what to make of Pro going forward. I'm truly lost on this team. Moving on to one of the more exciting series of the day, we had Faze taking on Team Spirit. Before we get too deep into the individual maps, I want to talk a lot about the veto here, because I feel like Faze kind of shot themselves in the foot with the veto, but I think there's a little more context to why it ended up being that way. Now, we open up with Spirit banning Inferno. It makes sense. It's a map that they don't play that often, and Faze are quite comfortable on it. Faze opt to remove Ancient, which we'll come back to in a second, which allows Spirit to pick Anubis. Faze then pick Nuke. Spirit removes Dust 2. Faze remove Vertigo, which leaves Mirage as the decider. Now, the big point of contention is the Ancient removal, which allows Spirit to pick Anubis. And when you look at these two teams, and we're just going to focus on the last month of play, then we'll go a little bit broader afterwards. In the last month, for Spirit, they have a 100% win rate on Nuke, 100% win rate on Anubis, a 66% win rate on Ancient, a 50% win rate on Mirage, and a 50% win rate on Vertigo. Now, admittedly, that's just 1 month to play, that's small sample size. We'll look at Faze for the last month, and they have a 100% win rate on Inferno and Ancient. They have a 50% win rate on Mirage, a 33% win rate on Nuke, and a 0% win rate on Vertigo and Anubis. So what I'm confused on is I don't know if Kerrigan was trying to see what the map pool was like, trying to feel something out for a future matchup potentially. But by banning Ancient first, a map that both these teams play at a reasonable clip, they allowed Spirit to pick a map that they play really well, Anubis, which is a map Faze have not been able to win on at all in recent time. And then on top of that, Faze follows it up with a Nuke pick, which Nuke is a comfort map for Faze. It's their most played map for this year, the last 6 months, but it's also a very highly picked and highly won map for Spirit. So you've given Spirit essentially the first 2 maps they could possibly want in this kind of series. And again, the theme of Spirit getting everything they could possibly want in this veto continues because Spirit now just banned Dust 2 because neither team wants to play it, it's too new, and now we're down to Vertigo and Mirage. If you cast your mind back to the Major, Vertigo was the surprise pick that allowed Faze to beat Spirit, but this time they both acknowledge that they don't really like playing it, they both prefer to play Mirage, so Faze bans Vertigo, which leaves a Mirage decider. This veto could not have gone more in the favor of Team Spirit, and that's what we saw play out because Spirit had a comfortable time beating Faze 2-0 in this series, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Faze allowed Spirit 2 of their best maps to be played here. I think Faze should have gone for Ancient, banned Anubis, and then allowed Nuke in because they both play it, and then see how things play out from there. I think allowing Anubis as the first map was just a weird choice by Kerrigan. Again, I don't know if it's because he wanted to feel it out for the playoffs or what, but Faze just haven't been good on Anubis. And getting into that first map, despite this being a close affair, I really think Spirit had the better stuff when it came down to those most crucial rounds. Faze managed to force it to an 11-11 situation off the back of great A-side anchoring on Rops's end. Rops looked monsters throughout this map, and throughout this tournament, he's been resurrecting some of that form we saw at the beginning of the year. He's looking really solid on the rifles here, and he was chewing up Spirit on the build-up to this 11-11 round. And in a situation where Faze looked nearly guaranteed to get match point, as Spirit are in a situation where they need to save. They're on just a mediocre Tech 9 armor buy with Donk on the hero Galil, and they smoke off E-Box, they take the water control, and here's Rain fishing for intel in a situation where he really didn't need to. He blows up the smoke with a grenade, Team Spirit are right there, they shoot him down, and now the map is cut in half. Losing mid, losing water is so critical for the CTs. It forces Faze in a position where they just need to play the sites, which allows Spirit to group up, go for the classic B split through E-Box and main, and there's just nothing to do here for Faze. Magix and Donk burst out, Magix comes out the other side with 2 Tech 9 kills, and that forces Faze into immediate save to play for overtime. Just the thinnest of margins, and had Rain not given himself up early in the round, it could have been totally different. And on that pivotal match point round, it's Donk, it's Magix working together once again. Donk gets through E-Box, Magic pairs up with a nade as he swings on Pillar, they blow open the B site by themselves, and even though Brokey gets a pick on Chopper towards mid, it doesn't matter. Spirit have the B bomb site, and they're so spread out they can cover the flanks. Zontex gets a huge closing pick, puts it into a 1v4, where Brokey has no hope, and that's the end of map 1. Spirit go up 1-0 in the series, and we're moving on to Nuke. And on Nuke, I think we saw the best situation in which Faze could have taken a map off here, because Donk and Zontex don't have good maps. 2 of your best players go, honestly, a little bit missing when you need them, but propping up Team Spirit when they need them most, and this is why they are looking so good in this tournament, it's Shiro, Magix, and even Chopper picking up the pieces. Magix looked insane anchoring the A side, Shiro's opping impact was fantastic, and even though we swapped to the second half, and things are just going back and forth, it feels like no one's really in control for more than 1 or 2 rounds at a time. It's just those little moments in the clutch where Spirit just looked better on the day, Faze unable to close out these CT rounds, Spirit just bleed them out to a 13-10 victory. And as good as Roms has looked throughout this tournament, he has a bit of a bad map here on Nuke. Frozen had a bad series, and that definitely could have made the difference. All in all, I think the shot calling was very on par between the 2 teams, and you could tell from the scorelines these are very competitive maps, but it's just those small details where the team play from Spirit was just a little bit better, and all the pieces were working just a little bit more coordinated than what Faze had, which allowed Spirit to take the jump to the semifinals. Faze are still in the playoffs, so they still have time to recover and make a run to the finals, but it's safe to say the Spirit are looking very dominant, and they are the best team left in the field right now. Next up, we had arguably an even bigger upset than G2 versus Mouse yesterday. We had 9Z defeating Vitality in a 2-0 series, and frankly, they looked dominant throughout. 9Z are the shock of the tournament to me, this South American org full of players that you have never heard of, from countries that have not represented World Counter-Strike pretty much ever, coming together in this tournament and looking great. And not just in the way that like, oh, these are fluke wins off the back of crazy star performances from players way overperforming themselves. No, this team, much like teams like Mouse, like Heroic, they are playing great, fundamental, sound Counter-Strike as a team and dominating in a way that looks repeatable. Like, wait, are these guys legit? They might be. And on the other side, this wasn't even a crazy underperformance by Vitality. ZywOo, Spinks looked dominant at several points throughout both maps. The calling from Apex wasn't bad. Mezzy and Flames, they had their impact where they needed it. This was not some crazy game where ZywOo went missing and Vitality couldn't do anything. No, 9Z beat them straight up. And we open on Dust 2 when they do it legit. Taking on the French on home soil, they win 13-9. They looked very comfortable handling this Vitality T-side as they start off their second half CT with 5 straight rounds, landing an early 12-5 match point. And even though Vitality, they fight back, they win the next gun round, force some saves out of 9Z. 9Z looked comfortable. They didn't look panicked at all. They knew they just had to get their economy right, get one solid defense out, and they're going to be able to take it home. Leading the way was DGT, Wasopeak, and Max, looking very good on both sides, and the strat going on the T side looked really solid. They played around ZywOo well and kept the AWP out of his hands as much as possible, which that's the key to victory against Vitality. And then we moved to Anubis, and what an absolute shootout we had. First off, ZywOo and Spinks, 28 kills, 29 kills respectively, looked incredibly dominant. Spinks and ZywOo took turns keeping Vitality in this game throughout the later stages of regulation and in the overtime. On the other side, Martinza looked like an absolute superstar. DGT continuing to shine. Max and Buddha were good as well. This was a complete team effort from 9Z to win the rounds they needed to. And the thing that stands out to me was again the poise, because we move into the overtime. You had a 10-6 lead and now you find yourselves on the back foot in overtime against Vitality, but you managed to right the ship in the overtime. You have a lead going on. You're up 15-13 with 2 chances to close out an insane upset series. You get the bomb down. In a 4v2 situation, ZywOo is alive with the AWP. He walks onto the B site and pulls out one of the craziest 4K clutches of his career, of this year, one of the plays of the year. ZywOo goes insane with the AWP by pillar, hitting 2 incredible shots into a no-scope, into the USP shot through the smoke, and the defuse. And now you're thinking, okay, ZywOo, he just went crazy. That's going to be huge for the momentum. We're going to go to double overtime. Can we hold out? Is this going to go to a third map? No. You come back the very next round, play very sound, solid Counter-Strike, work your picks, work your way onto the site, and close out the game in dominant fashion, not even sweating the insane clutch that just got dealt to you by one of the best players in the world. That is clinical Counter-Strike. That's not what you expect from tier 2 teams. That is poise that comes from experience that you wouldn't expect from an unproven team like this. 9Z, they rightfully win this series. They get to skip straight to the semifinals, and my only question is, will the 2-day break affect how they play? I really hope that this doesn't ice them and they have a legit shot in whatever semifinal opponent they get, because they've been, again, the find of the tournament. Congrats to them. Moving on to our next elimination series, we had Heroic taking on Big. And guys, just gonna be honest, I think this was the least interesting series of the day. It was the least competitive series of the day. And to be honest, I was much more distracted by G2 and Liquid, which was going on at the same time. So you look at the scores here, there's nothing really much to say. It's 13-7 on Ancient, it's 13-4 on Nuke. Heroic were by far the better team. Tessez, Shush, and Kixen all had great series. Meanwhile, Big, they played a great tournament, but Searson, JDC, players that have been clutch throughout the tournament, they fell short when they needed it most. Tabson, even himself, was underperforming his usual numbers. And Big, they just simply don't have enough against a team like Heroic. Heroic are really well built, really fundamental, and really sound with their Counter-Strike, and that means that teams like Big, which tend to fluctuate in terms of their individual performances, are always going to struggle, and that's what we saw play out here. This was Big's best tournament of the year, come out the back of them kicking God B, so I think they could still walk away from this with a lot of hope going into the future. Maybe a roster change, maybe a new coach, and we're looking at Big as like a top 15 team, but Heroic, they advanced through to the playoffs after grinding through the lower brackets. Deservedly, Heroic looking pretty good, all things considered. Big, take what you will. It was a good run, but you guys are heading home. We have one more series to cover. Let's go on to G2 and Liquid. And then in a series that tugged at my heartstrings left, right, and center all throughout, we had G2 taking on Team Liquid, vying for a spot in the playoffs. Loser go home. Stewie 2K, the NA hope for G2. Liquid, the last North American team standing. Who will represent North America in the Dallas arena? I don't know. Let's find out by talking about how this went. We opened up on Dust 2, which ended up being a 13-1 win for Liquid, and the storylines going into this were really interesting, as Stewie definitely had up and down impact for G2 thus far in this tournament, really just kind of being the piece that would come up for 1 or 2 rounds maybe in a set. But here we open up on Dust 2, and he leads the way on the CT side, locking down B early and giving G2 a huge burst of momentum. And definitely the story of this game is the CT sides really had firm control over what was going on. Neither team really felt very comfortable on the T side and really weren't able to secure many rounds. Liquid managed to keep things close at a 7-5 half, and they switch over by winning the pistol round and getting off to a strong start. However, G2 would win the first gun round and then go straight to an 11-7 scoreline, winning 4 in a row. That's when Liquid would show some really great knuckle down, lockdown defense, as they would win the next 6 to reverse sweep the map and go up 1-0 in the series. And there's not much to say here. As good as Liquid was at holding the sites, G2's T-side attacks just looked weak, the trading wasn't there, the flash support wasn't there, the takes looked uninspired, and nobody could get any goddamn kills. You look at the T-side scorelines for G2 and they are awful. Nico with 4 kills, Stewie2K with 3, Hunter with 6, Muncie with 2, Nexa with 5. That's just not gonna get it done. But unfortunately, Liquid activated G2's trap card, which is Inferno, which it appears no matter what iteration of G2 we see, Hooxie or no Hooxie, Nico performing or underperforming, G2 play damn good Inferno games. And frankly, they embarrassed Liquid in the second half of play. Liquid's CT side looked great. They dominated an 8-4 half. Everything's looking great. Liquid are in a good position to make a run at a 2-0 sweep here, but G2 would take over on the CT half and have a flawless performance, winning every single round, reverse sweeping from 8-4 into a 13-8 victory. And yeah, listen, some of these rounds were saves, those are gimmies, but some of these attacks from Liquid, they're going to look back on and really think about how they played out. You had huge plays like Muncie holding down the A site with an op at a Tech 9, getting a huge triple and one of the most insane flicks I've seen in a long time. Elsewhere, Liquid lacked any kind of punch on their attack, nobody wanting to entry. Even when they tried to entry on the B side, they're getting mowed down by Nico and Stewie, performing a great anchor duo. The attacks from Team Liquid just looked bad, the strats looked uncoordinated, the team play wasn't there, and nobody could entry to save their goddamn lives. You have Skulls and Cadian way at the bottom of the scoreboard looking awful, Twist having just kind of an okay map, Yakindar and NAV trying to keep them in it, but on the T side they just couldn't do enough, and that's why G2 forced us to a third map. We pull up on Nuke, and Nuke's going to be one that Liquid are going to want to forget. Because Liquid had the advantage on CT side Nuke. They had the 11-9 lead, they had control of the economy, they had everything they wanted, but then G2 just started winning their duels off of very simple executions and shutting Liquid out of rounds before they could even compete. On 11-10, it's a simple secret push. They pressure Cadian downstairs with the op. Cadian gets 1, but it's not enough. G2 can control the bottom bomb site in a 4v4 post-plan situation. NAV gets caught on ramp, and now the rest of Liquid, Yakindar, Skulls, and Twist, they're forced to save and hold on to the money. And then, in a round that just looks so bad in retrospect, 11-11 coming out of the timeout, G2 calls one of the simplest A rushes I have ever seen in pro play. Stewie2K pops through the smokes, through the flashes, through the molotovs, out squeaky, hits an insane double kill spray transfer to blow up on the site, force an immediate 5v3 where Liquid aren't even going to try. They have to run away and save, and that forces match point. At that point, Liquid look absolutely broken. G2 win the next round convincingly, and Liquid are going home. And based on the post-game interviews from Cadian, something I suggest you go watch yourself, I think this might be the end of this iteration of Liquid. I made another video linked above recently on the trouble in paradise going on at the Liquid headquarters. All I got to say is that I don't think Cadian is the problem. I think it's the rest of the team not buying into his in-game leading. Yakindar and Skulls continue to be the 2 worst aspects of the team to me, but I am softening on Yakindar as I talked about in my previous recaps. I think Skulls stands out as the biggest issue right now. We'll see what the future holds for Liquid going into the player break, but right now, they're going home. G2, they made it, they survive into the playoffs, and we survived to the end of the video, so let's take a quick look at the playoff bracket. So on Friday, we have Faze taking on G2 and Vitality taking on Heroic. Straight up, Vitality should beat Heroic, but Vitality are inconsistent. Heroic are a pretty consistent team. I think Heroic could win this, and it'd be a shocker if they did. Faze versus G2, I think all bets are off. Faze have not looked very consistent in this tournament. G2 just seem to be the wonder childs, able to upset anybody at any time with Stewie as the stand-in. Stewie on home soil, playoff crowd in Dallas, that might be the boost for G2 to take out Faze. However, Faze should, and that's the capital word, should win this series. That would give us semifinals of 9Z versus Faze and Spirit versus Vitality. I'm taking Spirit all day to win that, and I'm taking Faze to beat 9Z, though I think it will be close, which gives us a Faze Spirit rematch in the grand finals, which would be epic. We'll see how it plays out. And don't worry, I'll be here recapping everything as it happens. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Shout out to my channel members, Justin, Furley, Jesse, and Bubblesj. Thank you guys so much for the support. If you want to become a channel member, take a look at the description down below. It costs you $5 a month. It helps me out immensely. Other than that, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Later.